Coming up on this episode of Crime Family, the Long Island serial killer or LISK case.
There's somebody after me.
Where are you, ma'am?
You were part of this all along.
Hold on, I just met him just now.
Police find a body wrapped in burlap that they believe is Shannan Gilbert, but it became very clear early into the medical examiner's examination that the body was not Shannan's.
Maureen Brainerd Barnes went missing in 2007. On July 12, 2009, 24-year-old sex worker Melissa Barthelemy, she was last seen. Megan Waterman, she was last seen on June 6, 2010. 27-year-old Amber Costello, she went missing on September 2nd, 2010.
I don't want to speculate either way because there's a lot of people saying she was killed and a lot of people saying it was just a coincidence, but I don't know.
Hey everyone, welcome to Crime Family. I'm Katie and I'm here with my brother and sister AJ and Steph, and we are starting another 4-episode deep dive, and this one is going to be about the Long Island serial killer, or LISK. And there's lots to go over in this case, just like the other ones, so get ready to unpack everything that we have here. And just something interesting that this first episode is actually being released 14 years to the day that the woman we're going to talk about, Shannan Gilbert, went missing. So that's just kind of interesting. We didn't plan that, but it just kind of happened. So yeah, I'm just going to get right into it. Like I said, this is the Long Island serial killer or LISK case. And this case is also sometimes known as the Gilgo Beach murders. And it was a mystery for years as to who the Long Island serial killer was. And there's also speculation that more than one serial killer had been using the Gilgo Beach area on Long Island in New York as a dumping ground. And just recently, some long-awaited answers have been found surrounding the Long Island killings, but we are going to get into that a bit later. Not this episode, but stay tuned. So like I mentioned, Shannan Gilbert, this case usually starts with her mysterious disappearance, and that's where we are going to start as well, as her disappearance is what essentially got the ball rolling for this whole investigation into the Long Island serial killer, as the search for her uncovered the dumping ground on Gilgo Beach. So Shannan Gilbert was a 23-year-old woman living in New Jersey. She was very smart, and she even graduated high school early at the age of 16. She had dreams of becoming a singer and an actress, and she was going to school to be a writer. So she had moved out of her home with her sisters and mom, and she got involved with a crowd that introduced her to sex work and showed her just how much money she could make as an escort. So to try and better her life, Shannan started working as an escort. And even though she was smart about the whole thing and how she operated, she still found herself in trouble. So at first she had worked with an escort service, but they got shut down, and then she realized that she could make a lot more money if she just did it on her own and put up ads rather than rely on services to find clients for her, as they would obviously take a cut of her earnings. So if she just did it herself, she would get the full profit. Shannan actually had a driver named Michael Pack, and he would drive her to wherever she was meeting her clients, usually at their house. And then he would either wait around and pick her up after. Like, she would call him, then he would come back and pick her up. And then he got a portion of what she made. So it seemed like a lot safer for her to have this man that, would even wait outside the house for her if she wanted him to. Like I said, though, despite her even having Michael essentially there to ensure she gets home safely, something happens to Shannan, and to this day, the details are still a mystery. Like, nobody knows for sure what actually happened. So in the early morning hours of May 1st, 2010, Shannan calls Michael to pick her up as she was in touch with a client, and she needs Michael to drive her out to Oak Beach on Long Island to a client named Joseph Brewer's house. So she gets to Joe's house around 2 o'clock in the morning, and since Oak Beach is a little bit farther out than usual, Michael actually just waits out in his vehicle in the driveway for Shannan to be done with Joe. So now, a little while later, it's reported that Joe and Shannan actually come out of the house together, and they tell Michael that they have to go run an errand. And so they're gone about 15 minutes. And so remember, this is like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So there's speculation that they were out buying drugs, but that was never actually confirmed, as Joe never admitted that that's what they were doing to the police. He just said that they ran out for an errand. It seems likely that that's what was happening, especially when you consider Shannan's behavior and actions in the hours after her and Joe return. So a couple hours go by and Michael is still sitting outside, and then all of a sudden Joe comes out and tells him that Shannan is freaking out inside and she won't leave, and he needs Michael to come get Shannan out of his house. Michael goes in and he tries to get Shannan to leave with him, but something has happened inside that house, or just something is making Shannan freak out. And so this is where a lot of the mystery lies in this case. There hasn't been confirmation that Shannan took drugs, but she could have been having a bad trip or some sort of break, because even when Michael gets in there and he tells her that she needs to go with him, she runs behind the couch, trying to hide, and she is scared enough that she calls 911. And even the 911 call is confusing. It doesn't give many answers as to what she is experiencing inside Joe's house. And so the full 911 call is over 20 minutes. We're going to play some of it here for you now, just portions of it, because a lot of it is, the 911 operators like trying to get answers from her and her not answering. A lot of it is you can hear her running down the street, knocking on doors and things like that. So yeah, we're going to play some clips from that now.
State Police, Trooper Fry. State Police.
Yeah, there's somebody after me.
I'm sorry?
There's somebody after me.
Where are you?
There's somebody after me.
Okay, where are you?
There's somebody after me.
Where are you, ma'am?
I don't know.
You're driving right now?
No, I'm inside the house.
I'm sorry?
I'm inside the house.
What house?
I don't know. Can you trace where I am?
I'm sorry?
Can you trace where I am?
No, I can't. What's your callback number you're calling from?
Huh?
What phone number are you calling from?
Somebody's after me. Please.
Are you in Suffolk County or Nassau County?
I'm in Long Island.
Where on Long Island are you?
No. 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 No, stop, no.
Where in Long Island are you? In Suffolk County? Nassau County?
Huh? All right. Why didn't you call me by my name? Why?
County, you on the line?
Stop. Please. Stop it, please. Please stop. Please. Can you shut the door?
No, time to go.
Please. Please. Please.
Go that way, please. Come on, let's go. Come on, roll that side. Come on, go outside. Come on, all of us. Come on, roll that side. Come on.
No, please.
Come on. Please, come on.
Please.
Come on.
Why?
Just come out here.
You're a part of this all along.
Hold on, I just met him just now.
Nine, how can I assist you? Hello? Hello? Hello, you dialed into the 911 system. How can I assist you? Hello?
Yeah.
Do you need the police?
Yeah.
Where?
That's
Where? Who's there with you? Hello? What's going on?
there's somebody asking.
What?
Somebody asking me.
Somebody is harassing you?
After me.
Who?
Can you trace her in?
Driver's out there. Driver's right there.
Let me talk to him.
Can you trace her in?
Let me talk to him.
I'm by the Jones Beach.
You're at Jones Beach?
By the Jones Beach.
All right, let me connect you to state police. Stay on the line.
So, what are your guys' thoughts on this 911 call?
Super creepy. Super creepy.
Yeah, she just she just sounds so scared. And you can't really you hear some voices in the background, but she just seems so terrified of what's happening in that house. And she just doesn't want to be there. It's a very, like AJ said, very creepy 911 call.
Yeah, and it's really frustrating too because, like Katie kind of said, there's so much mystery because she never really comes out and says exactly what she's scared of or what is happening. And even though she's asked multiple times, she has plenty of opportunities to do that because it's a long call, but she's just very vague. She just says I think she says something like someone's trying to hurt me or something, but she's very unclear about the situation. And also I find it really annoying is that she's on this call for a long time, but they're not able to trace her location, which is super weird. I feel like that's something that does happen when you call 911. So the fact that they couldn't do that, because she even asks them at one point, can you trace my call? And the operator says, no, we can't. So that's annoying. But it's just frustrating that there's so much mystery because no one's, obviously she's not coming out and saying, obviously maybe she can't because they're right there. If she feels threatened by him, she's not going to maybe say the full details or something. I don't know, but just frustration and creepiness were my two first reactions.
Yeah, same. And it's she kind of goes back and forth from being, sounds like she's scared the whole time, but she's accuses Mike of kind of being in this conspiracy with Joe. She keeps saying, oh, you set this whole thing up. But Mike's saying no, I just met him tonight. I don't know what you're talking about. But then she's also get me out of here, Mike. So she trusts him enough for her to ask him to help her. But, she won't go with him. She's scared to leave the house. So it does seem like she's very delusional, something's going on. And also you can hear her voice is very slurred, it sounds. And she's not actually listening to the 911 operators. She ignores a lot of their questions, which is frustrating. And another thing that's frustrating is just if she would have just given her phone to maybe one of the neighbors that she knocked on the door and was talking to, then they could have, gave the 911 operator the address and the cops could have been there a lot sooner. So it's just so many things could have happened that could have helped her. And that unfortunately they just didn't happen. So yeah, it's very, very strange call. And it's actually reported that police were never dispatched for this call. And because early on in the beginning there, you can hear that Shannan says she's actually at Jones Beach instead of Oak Beach. So even if police were dispatched, they would have gone to the wrong location anyways. And yeah, and like AJ was saying, they say they can't trace the call, which, I don't know, maybe they just didn't have the technology back then, but I feel 2010, they would have. I don't know, there could have been something wrong. Maybe she had one of those burner phones where you can't trace very easily, something like that.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I actually realized maybe she was using a burner phone, considering she was an escort. Maybe she used those phones and maybe they're untraceable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was like, because the dispatcher was like, we can't trace it. I'm like, that seems to be impossible. You can't trace it. Like, that's literally what you do,
Well,
isn't it?
Yeah.
The fact that
So-
she asked if this call could be traced is like she wants someone to find her. That's what kind of struck me as odd, is that she asked that it was being, if this call was being traced, because normally people who are calling 911 don't ask that, because I guess you assume that they are being traced. Which to me, she was on the phone for like 21 minutes. Like, you can't trace her at all. Like, that's just...
Yeah, it's weird. And she never tells people she's with, like, Michael or Joe, that she's on the 911 call. And it's almost like she doesn't want them to know, maybe, that she's called them, because she's not talking to the 911 dispatchers as she's talking to, like, Michael, right? So it's kind of like she was talking to them and then she puts the phone down and is talking to Michael. So I don't know, maybe she didn't want them to know she was on the call. So it's all very confusing.
When she left the house to go to the neighbor's house, like, were they following her? Like I know she was running away. Like, were they following her, or did they, like, not leave the house? Because it really seems to me like they wouldn't just, or Michael wouldn't just leave her, like, by herself. Like, you think he would run after her to try to, like, get her to come back or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, so Joe actually, like, went upstairs and he told Michael, like, he's like, I'm just gonna go upstairs, you get her out of here, kind of thing. And just maybe, like, she was just kind of freaking out that Joe was there because she didn't actually know him. So he kind of just left the situation. And she was still freaking out when Michael was there. But I'm gonna get into this a little bit, that Michael was actually trying to follow her down the street in his SUV. So he didn't just, like, get up and leave. He was trying to get her back into his car. So...
But do you guys think that she, like, did take drugs or something? Like, obviously that seems like the logical conclusion, because, I mean, if she trusts somebody like Michael enough to, like, be kind of that person who goes with her and, like, takes care of her, like, it's weird that all of a sudden she would be so terrified of him that she would try to run away from him. She wouldn't go with him.
Yeah, I think Joe slipped something in her drink, if they were drinking at the place, or they did go get drugs and she took a bad acid trip, or, like, just very paranoid. Because, like Asia said, you don't just all of a sudden freak out about somebody who took you to this place and who is going to protect you and then, like, not want to be around them, and because she kind of goes back and forth. So I don't know if it, like, I don't think it would have been, like, a mental breakdown. I think she took something, but I mean, I'm just assuming, I'm just speculating. I have no idea.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it could be a combination of a couple of things, because there's some reports that say that she actually had bipolar and she wasn't taking her proper medications. And so I don't know a ton about bipolar, but I do know that there's ups and downs, and there's some things that used to be called, like, mania, which is where you could actually see hallucinations and you could, you know, kind of have this manic psychotic state if you don't manage the disease properly. So if she had that, wasn't taking her meds at all, or wasn't taking them properly, or was mixing them with, you know, illegal drugs and alcohol, it seems super, like, likely that she could be having this break, just a mental break from these drugs, or lack of her proper drugs. So that's what I think is going on for me. And, like, even interviews with her mom and her family say that, yeah, she definitely had bipolar and just didn't take her medications properly. So that's for sure a possibility. Something just snapped, right?
Yeah, like, if she didn't take her bipolar meds but then took these other drugs, if she did take drugs, like, just the combination of that. And I guess, yeah, what you were saying before about, like, that her not wanting them to know that she was on the 911 call, like, if she's paranoid and terrified of them, obviously, if they know that she's on the phone with them, then that's going to anger them more. So it makes sense that she's not outright telling them where she is or whatever, even if, because I don't know why I didn't even think of that, but when I was listening to the call, I was like, it's so annoying because, like, she's on the call for so long, but yeah, it makes sense. And I guess she thinks that maybe they're able to trace, so she doesn't have to say, because there's lots of times where people just can, like, dial 911 and not say anything, and the police can show up to where they trace the call to. So, but if she's using a burner phone, then maybe she doesn't know that. Although I guess that's why I use a burner phone, because it's not traceable. But I guess maybe in that state, she, like, forgot that she was using a burner phone and that they can't trace it. And she thinks that they're still going to be able to find her, even if she doesn't give them the right location.
And I mean, and she doesn't hang up the phone either, right? She could easily just hang up. So maybe the fact that she thinks that she's on the phone for long enough, they could eventually trace her. Because, I don't know, back in the day, they had to be on the phone for a certain amount of time before they could trace the call. I'm not sure if she was thinking about that, but I mean, she kept the phone on for like 20 minutes while she's running around. So yeah, it just seems like she obviously wanted them to help her for sure.
And you'd think though that there'd be like someone like a 911 operator they would come up with the technology where you can trace even a burner phone after a certain amount of time or something. Like, to me, that seems weird that there'd be no way around that. But I guess that's why people still use them to this day if they truly are untraceable.
Yeah, and I mean, they could probably trace them to the fact they could know which tower it's bouncing off of, right? But that would just give you like a vague idea. There's no way you could pinpoint the exact address she was at. So I'm not sure if they even could do that. But yeah, obviously there was no way for them to figure out where she was. And she told them she was in the wrong location anyway, but yeah, so just really frustrating and sad for her. So as you can hear on the 911 call, Shannan is running down the street. You can hear her feet on the pavement running, her shoes, and you can hear her banging on doors. And there is actually one person who admits to seeing Shannan in the early morning hours of May 1st. So a 75-year-old retiree who lived in the neighborhood, his name was Gus Coletti, he recounts his encounter with Shannan that morning for Discovery Plus's show called Disappeared in an episode called Footprints in the Sand. And you can actually hear him on Shannan's 911 call as well. So around 5 a.m. that morning, he was up and he was getting ready to head out on a drive to an antique show with his wife. And he hears banging on his door and he hears someone screaming for help. And he sees a woman who, of course, he later knows to have been Shannan out on his front porch. And she's clearly very scared of something. You can hear him in the 911 call. And he even says, is somebody like after you or someone chasing you or something like that? So he opens up the door for her. She comes in and she's inside just kind of like yelling, help me. Gus actually calls 911 as well. And he tries to comfort Shannan by telling her that the police are on their way and that they'll be able to help her. But as soon as she hears that, she runs back out the door into the night. And Gus goes out after her to wait for the police, and he notices that there's a black SUV driving down the street slowly. It's stopping, it's putting its brights on, and then it goes a little further as if it's searching for something or someone. And so Gus actually goes up to the SUV, and it's Michael Pack, who asks Gus if he's seen a young girl. And he was looking for her because he says that they were at a house party and that she ran off, and so he's trying to get her back. And when Gus tells Michael that he's called the police, Michael says he shouldn't have done that because Shannan's going to get in trouble. And the police do arrive, they do talk to Gus, but they aren't aware of Shannan's situation. They don't know that she was an escort, they don't know why she was scared for her life, and they don't connect Gus's 911 call with Shannan's because, like I said, Shannan said she was near Jones Beach. And so I think these 911 calls came in to maybe, it probably came into different dispatchers. So they weren't aware that these were connected at all. Shannan actually, after she leaves Gus's house, she knocks on another woman's door named Barbara, calling for help. And Barbara calls 911 as well, but Barbara doesn't let Shannan into her house. She's a little freaked out, doesn't know what's going on. Shannan eventually runs away from Barbara's house as well. And that's the last known place where Shannan was ever seen. And that's where the mystery is. Like, where'd she go? Why is she running? And what happened? Another thing comes up, and according to John Ray, who's the Gilbert's family lawyer, he talks on the A&E's series called The Killing Season. And he says that they have significant evidence that a man named Dr. Peter Hackett actually called Shannan's family to say that he was sorry that Shannan was missing and that he was worried about her. And he says that he ran a home for wayward girls and that Shannan had been there and he had medicated her and then she left with her driver. But he was worried because she never came back. And it took 2 days after Shannan went missing for her family to know that she was missing. It seems weird that he would call Shannan's family saying that he was worried about her because they're like, who is this guy? Why is he calling us? And John Ray claims that Hackett's neighbor says that Shannan did go to Hackett's house that night, and he says that he did medicate her and that she left in a really confused state of mind. And Hackett denies this, even though Shannan's mom says he told her that on the phone, that he had seen Shannan. Hackett says that he didn't see Shannan. He didn't medicate her. He doesn't run a rehab for wayward girls. It's like, where's all this information coming from? And to me, it kind of thinks like maybe that was the error and that Shannan and Joe went out to run. Like maybe they went over to Peter's house, got some drugs from him. That's of course speculation, but it kind of connects the two things if you want to think about it that way.
But so the neighbor said that that this Dr. Peter Hackett did run this place or whatever, and then also Shannon's family said that this guy called and said that he did. So how would those two things be the same?
Well, the neighbor didn't say that he ran a house for wayward girls. The neighbor said that Shannan went to Peter Hackett's house that night.
Oh.
And Shannon's mom said that Peter Hackett himself told her that he ran a house for wayward girls, even though he didn't at all. So
obviously Shannon's family is telling the truth with that phone call, because it's like similar, like this man by the same name as this person, like who, like this, his neighbor says that Shannan went there, and the family saying that Peter called them saying that he ran this house for wayward girls or whatever. So like obviously the family's telling the truth that they did get this call, and obviously the neighbor, because like those two people wouldn't know the same man or those same details. You know what I'm saying? So like it's weird. Like obviously there has to be some truth to that like Shannan was at his house that night, for the neighbor to say that, and then for the family to say that he called them saying stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is super weird, and I don't remember why they think why the neighbor knows that, but they're saying that it's legitimate, and also they do have evidence that Peter called the family. So it all seems super suspicious at this point. Like, what if if Peter didn't see her, doesn't have a house of wayward girls, like why call and say that? It makes zero sense.
Unless it's somebody pretending to be this Dr. Peter Hackett, who like maybe knows him and is trying to frame him or something.
I guess,
because maybe someone called pretending to be.
That's what I was just gonna say. Maybe it wasn't him at all. Maybe it was just somebody else. But that just seems odd to me.
The police checked his phone records, and they actually have proof that he called, or somebody called from his wife's cell phone to Shannan Gilbert's mother. So, I don't know.
It's weird.
Yeah. And eventually he does actually come forward and say that, yes, he called Shannan's mother because he was worried about Shannan. But he actually didn't know Shannan, didn't treat her, didn't see her that night. So it's all very weird.
So he just called to say that he was sorry she was missing.
Yes. Yeah.
But not basically that he had a wayward house for wayward girls.
No. No.
But obviously he said that, because why would the family say that? Like, I can't think, like, why would the family make up that detail? Like, to me, it's like he obviously said that.
I know.
In the phone call.
Yeah. It's very weird.
And like it's more believable that he would say that and then deny it when he's questioned about it later. But like the family's not going to make that detail up.
No, there's no reason for them to make it up. Like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I believe them. So it's like, whether it's true or not, I feel like it's true that he did say that to them. But why would he say that if it wasn't true? Or it isn't true? It's so weird.
It's very weird. Yeah. After Shannan's been missing for about 7 or 8 days, Shannan's two sisters, Cherie and Sarah, actually traveled down to Gilgo Beach themselves because they're not getting any answers from police. And they actually go to Joseph Brewer's house. They confront him. Somehow they know that he was one of the last people to have seen Shannan before she disappeared. To me, this is like super brave, because you really have no idea who Joe is, how he's going to react. I mean, for all they know, he could have actually been dangerous after all. But they go and they talk to him, and he tells them that he really does not know what happened to Shannan. He said she's sorry that she's missing, but that's all that really happens. And Cherie and Sarah actually find Shannan's earring outside near the bottom of Joe's house. That they say somehow the police, even though they were in the area, they had not spotted that. They had missed it. So they're just thinking that they really didn't look very hard, didn't care enough to even spot this big hoop earring out on his step.
Weird. But how did they find out that he was one of the last people to see her? Do we know that?
I actually don't know. Like, I don't think it ever came up in this research that I found. They just somehow knew. Maybe the police told them. Maybe they were open about that. But yeah. A little bit after Shannan had gone missing, the police were finally able to look at Shannan's call logs, and they realized that her 911 call and the one that came from Gus were actually related. And so police do interview Michael and Joe extensively, but they conclude that what they're saying, Michael and Joe, their story is legitimate, and that they didn't have anything to do with Shannan's disappearance. even though they were there. They believe that Shannan kind of ran off and got lost, and they don't know what happened. And so this, I think, is why they continue to search in that area for her, because they are now connecting this 911 call, Shannan's, to Gus's. And yeah, so as the weeks and months go on and there's no evidence or trace of Shannan anyone can find, the police are searching on foot and in the neighborhood where she last went missing. Finally, in December of 2010, police bring in their canine units in to help with the search, and they're searching in the brush along the highway. So along Ocean Park Avenue, I think it is, there's a lot of swampy area surrounding the highway. And the canine dog named Blue, he actually makes a gruesome discovery. So police find a body wrapped in burlap that they believe is Shannan Gilbert. And the police actually even tell Shannan's family that they're pretty sure they have found Shannan's remains. What they found was almost completely skeletal remains. So visually, they couldn't just look at the remains and say that it was Shannan. The remains were sent for testing. And there's one very specific thing that they were looking for to make them sure that it was Shannan, even before they did do DNA testing, because Shannan actually had a metal titanium plate in her jaw due to a very bad beating from her boyfriend. And so that's kind of what they were looking for as the biggest clue to say that it was Shannan. But it became very clear early into the medical examiner's examination that the body was not Shannan's, as that metal plate was not found. And so as the police continue to search the area for more evidence, they discover a lot more than they were expecting.
Yeah, and during the search for Shannan in December 2010, the police came across the bodies of 4 other women. 3 of them were found in burlap sacks in what became known as the Gilgo 4, and the case as a whole was largely known as the Gilgo Beach murders. So the 4 other women that the police actually find are 25-year-old Maureen Brainerd Barnes, who went missing in the summer of 2007, 24-year-old Melissa Barthélemy, last seen in July 2009, 22-year-old Megan Waterman, who was last seen in June 2010, and 27-year-old Amber Costello, who was last seen in September of 2010. So, yeah, like Katie said, the police cadaver dog, which was used in the search for Shannan Gilbert, came upon the scent of a body, and ultimately this first body that they found was the remains of Melissa Barthélemy, and then the other 3 women. And the bodies were reportedly found only approximately 500 feet from each other on the north side of Ocean Parkway, near Gilgo Beach on Long Island. And it was noted that they had been, quote, bound with belts or tape and wrapped in burlap, end quote. And CNN reported that. Of these first 4 victims that were found in December 2010, Maureen Brainerd Barnes is believed to be the first one killed. Like I said, she went missing in 2007, so she's believed to be the first of these 4 that were killed. So Maureen was 25 years old at the time of her disappearance, and she was a sex worker. On July 9th of 2007, Maureen lived in Connecticut, and she calls one of her friends on July 9th to say that she has an, quote, out call, end quote, which was according to Suffolk County Police and reported by CNN. So 5 days later, on July 14th, this friend that Maureen had called on the 9th, she actually reports Maureen missing to the Norwich Police Department in Connecticut because she didn't hear anything at all from Maureen since that July 9th phone call. So according to reports, Maureen is believed to have taken an Amtrak train from her home in Connecticut to Manhattan on July 6th. She stayed at the Super 8 Motel in Manhattan during her few-day-long stay in the city, and this was a normal practice for her. So Maureen was a sex worker, and she would often take the train into the city from Connecticut for a few days at a time, where she would work out of this small motel, and she would meet with clients, a few clients, before going back home. So she was known to advertise her escort services on sites such as Craigslist under different aliases. A report by Fox 5 News says that oftentimes Maureen would travel to the city with another female who would also work out of the same motel as her, and they were also both known to bring male friends with them for some level of safety on their trip. Obviously, they must have known the inherent dangers of these routines and of the type of work that they were doing. So on this last trip that she took into the city, She went with the same female friend, but that friend ended up returning home early. So she went back to Connecticut, and Maureen stayed behind for unknown reasons, and she ended up staying for a couple of extra days. So on the phone call on the night of July 9th, which was this last phone call that she ever had, she told this friend that she was leaving the motel to meet a client rather than having the client come to her at the motel. And this was something that was out of the ordinary. And this was the last time that anyone ever spoke or heard from Maureen. And then her body was found over 3 years later, along with the other 3 bodies. So Maureen was described as being extremely artistic. She was a loving mother, sister, and a friend. And CNN reports Maureen's sister as saying, quote, Maureen would never get the chance to show the world how talented she was, end quote. Her sister also says, quote, my family will never get the chance to know who Maureen would be today because her life was tragically taken, end quote. And so it was this same sister who gave those quotes, who also says that before all of this, Maureen had worked as a seasonal telemarketer. She had a telemarketing job that was seasonal, but she had fallen on hard times because she lost her job and then she was facing eviction from her apartment. So out of desperation, she turned to escorting to make money, and this led her to taking that final out call on the night of July 9th, 2007. And the night that she went missing, she was contacted on a burner phone. CBS News reports that, quote, between July 6th and July 9th, there were 16 interactions between the caller using a burner phone and Brainerd Barnes' cell phone, end quote. So whoever this client was had called her from a burner phone, and they had multiple interactions 16 times back and forth in the days leading up to it until that final call on July 9th. That was the last one that she would ever take. So obviously this person that was calling her, this client, is obviously going to be a person of interest if she is the last client that saw her alive. So if they could determine who that was, then they would be a little bit closer to figuring out what happened with Maureen's disappearance. So then 2 years after Maureen goes missing, on July 12th, 2009, 24-year-old sex worker Melissa Barthelemy, who lived in the Bronx, she was last seen after telling a friend that she was going to meet a man and she would be back the next morning. 6 days later, after no sign of Melissa, her mother reports her missing to authorities. And through searches of Melissa's cell phone records, they know that her phone had pinged in towers in Manhattan, Freeport, Massapequa, and Long Island. So shortly after Melissa disappears and she was reported missing, what's really creepy is her family actually begins receiving these ominous phone calls from Melissa's phone. And it's a man on the other end, and he tells them that he killed their daughter. So CNN reports that this mysterious man said to Melissa's sister on a call from August 26, 2009, quote, do you think you'll ever see her again? You won't. I killed her, end quote, before hanging up. So reportedly, this same man in a separate call referred to Melissa as a whore when talking to Melissa's 15-year-old sister, and then in another phone call went into graphic detail describing, quote, what he had done sexually, end quote, to her. So super creepy, whoever this man is. And it's the same phone that Melissa had been using when she went missing. So it is someone who gets possession of her phone somehow. So whether it's this same man or the same client that she went to go see, or if it's a different person, but somehow they have her phone. So it's just super creepy. And despite tracking her cell phone activity from the night of her disappearance and these super creepy phone calls, police were never able to determine what happened to Melissa or who was responsible. Well, at least not for a long time anyways, because Melissa's body was the first of the Gilgo 4 to be inadvertently be discovered on December 11th, 2010. While it was her body that police first came across that night, she was the second of these 4 bodies that were initially found to be killed. And so third person that they believe was third to be killed was Megan Waterman, and she was last seen on June 6th, 2010. And she was 22 at the time that she disappeared. Like the previous 2 victims, Megan was a sex worker, and she lived in Maine and then would often take trains into New York City for trips where she would work as an escort. So similar to that first woman I spoke about, Maureen, similar thing. Like she lived out of the city but would take trains in quite frequently to meet with clients. She left the Holiday Inn Express Hotel where she was staying at in Long Island in the early morning hours of June 6th around 1:30 a.m. She left the hotel to meet a client and was never seen again. All police knew about her disappearance was that she was also contacted on a burner phone that had been activated that same day, so June 5th is when this burner phone got activated, And then she goes missing, in the early morning hours of like the next day, June 6th. There is video surveillance footage of her at the Holiday Inn Express in Long Island, which is the last time that police believe that she was ever seen alive, other than this person that is responsible. She left her phone and her purse inside the hotel room when she goes to meet this person. So that's unfortunate, of course. And then on June 8th, which was 2 days after she was last seen, her family reports her missing because they hadn't heard from her. And Megan actually had a young daughter that she left in her parents' care. And they found it odd that she hadn't called to even check in with them or with her daughter, see how her daughter was doing. So that's what initially caused suspicion, which led them to report her missing. And then her body was found near Gilgo Beach on December 13th, 2010. And then out of these 4 victims that they are the first to be found by the police in this case, 27-year-old Amber Costello, she was the one that they believe was the last of the 4 to be murdered. She went missing on September 2nd, 2010, and was last seen near her home on Long Island on September 2nd after leaving her home to go meet with a client. And Amber, like the other victims, was also a sex worker. She worked as an escort to help sustain her addiction to heroin. And in this case, witnesses reportedly told the police that this client that Amber went to meet on the day she went missing had been to Amber's house before, and they had actually had a description of what this man looked like. He was described as, quote, a large white male, approximately 6'4" to 6'5", with big oval-style glasses, end quote. He was also described as looking like an ogre in one witness's account. This is like the closest they have to like a possible description of this person.
Did the police do any like search of them, like when they were reported missing? Like I feel like they kind of just brushed it off because they were sex workers or...
Well, I mean, there was a little bit, like with Melissa's family that was receiving those phone calls from that man. Like, obviously, they knew enough. They did enough investigation to know this person was using a burner phone, and like phone calls were reported, and they were able to track like the towers that her phone had pinged from in various places, like around New York, like Long Island and all that. So they did enough. But I mean, we've seen, a lot of times, sex workers are targets for people like this. If it's a serial killer, we've seen other serial killers who target sex workers just because they know that these people are less likely to be found because the police don't care. Obviously, especially if they're like addicted to drugs or something like that, it's high risk behavior. So it's easy for the police to say, well, maybe they're just don't want to be found. They'll turn up or whatever. So definitely not surprising that the police do the bare minimum.
Like, I'm just wondering, like, if their families ever, like, I'm sure their family kept up with trying to search for them. It's just sad that, like, they wasn't continuously searched. Or maybe it was, we just don't have all the details. But I feel like because they were sex workers, they were, like, just put to the side and, like, oh, yeah, well, the work they're in is dangerous, so things happen. It's kind of just unfortunate, but I don't know. I'm just wondering if their families kept up with the search and stuff, and if they tried to do their own investigations, because it just seems like there wasn't a whole lot of information out there on the girls at the time, just from what we were reading. But
yeah, well, there is actually a part I'm going to get into shortly here where that talks about a little bit about the action that the sister of one of the victims takes.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to get into that. But yeah, so I think in these kind of cases when it's like marginalized people who are in sex work or if they're addicted to drugs or something, like really it kind of is up to the family to really take more of the initiative because they know the police are less likely to be inclined to look into that. And we know, we've covered lots of cases where that's been the case, where it's like that's why serial killers target marginalized people like that, because it allows them to continue killing and going under the radar because they know the police aren't going to be looking. So, yeah, it's definitely not shocking. And also especially considering the fact that they only came across these 4 bodies when they were looking for someone else. So, that person they were looking for was also a sex worker. So they were still doing the investigation for her, but definitely not high priority missing persons cases, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, especially since they had no idea that these women were connected in any way and that they had been, potentially killed by the same person or killed at all. They really weren't looking into it as much as they should have, or maybe would have if they knew that there was a pattern going on before they found them. So
Yeah, and like it's very it's like only in retrospect where obviously you can see the connections, but at the time, like the New York metropolitan area, like Long Island and all that, there's millions and millions of people, right? And like having these 4 sex workers go missing in this huge metropolitan area, probably different jurisdictions, police departments that are like looking into them, and they probably have like thousands of other sex workers who've also gone missing, not necessarily connected to each other. So it makes sense that they wouldn't connect them right away because it's probably just a common occurrence, unfortunately.
And a couple of them weren't even from that state, right? They had been traveling in and they were staying at hotels. So it wasn't like they all lived there and the community noticed they weren't there. They weren't even there usually to start with. So yeah, be super hard to track and notice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with Maureen and I think it was Megan or one of the two. Yeah, like one was from Connecticut, one was from Maine that would just go into New York to do their work, right? So they probably, when they got reported, like they get reported to like Connecticut as a missing person because they live there. So it's not even the same state looking into it.
Yeah, that was one of the things that Shannan Gilbert's mom was saying too when they called the police, because she lived in New Jersey. So when they called Long Island said, well, oh, she's from New Jersey, you got to call the New Jersey police. They would call New Jersey. New Jersey would say, well, she went missing in Long Island, so you have to contact them. So they kind of got bounced back and forth. No one either wanted to deal with it, thought it wasn't their jurisdiction. So I feel like that's probably a lot happened, or that probably happened a lot in cases like this as well. So yeah.
Yeah. And that happens. I feel like they're all so overrun, all these police departments, that like the last thing they want is another case on their plate. So their first reaction is probably to just shift it over to another jurisdiction. Oh, she went missing actually there, so you have to follow up there. So they're always just bouncing them around, I feel.
Yeah, exactly. So another thing about Amber Costello, so she had a roommate named Dave Scholler, and he actually told police that this client that Amber had met that night was offering her around 6 times the amount that she would normally make for a visit. So this person was offering her $1,500 for the night. And he says that this guy was very persistent, and he called Amber several times on the phone, and they would talk for a while each time. And it was like he was really pursuing her. It wasn't like he wanted to give up and just find somebody else. It was like he was set on Amber. And even though Amber was an experienced escort and knew the safety hazards that came along with that type of work, somehow this client convinced her to meet him alone in his car, and she went without her purse or her cell phone, which just seems super out of the ordinary for her. And Dave says that around midnight, Amber left and that he never saw her again. And in this series, The Killing Season, he says that if he would have just followed her out to the car a little bit, maybe 10 feet down the road, he could have seen the guy, he could have seen the car, maybe got a license plate or something. But unfortunately, he just didn't do that. And so, yeah, he watched Amber walk down the street, and that was the last time he ever saw her.
Yeah, and so Kim Overstreet, who is Amber Costello's sister, so she actually took action in an attempt to locate Amber or the person that was responsible for her disappearance. She probably recognized that the police weren't doing enough or whatever, but obviously she kind of became Amber's advocate in many ways. So part of her efforts, she put out ads imploring other escorts to call her if they ever came across a client that just didn't seem right or maybe seemed suspicious or threatening. So she was hoping that if this guy was going to strike again with other escorts, that maybe they might speak up and maybe possibly give a description or just get her a little bit closer, or police a little bit closer to finding this guy. One additional thing that witnesses told the police was that the client Amber left with the last time she was seen drove a, quote, first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche, end quote, which actually ends up being a major clue that becomes very important in this case. So just keep that description of the car, the first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche, in mind, because it is going to come up later. That's a little bit about these 4 women victims that do get found, the Gilgo Beach 4. So just wanted to give a little bit of what had happened with them, the situations, the circumstances around the disappearances, and kind of their investigation. So we spoke about those 4 individual cases. And like I said, they were found in December 2010. And the police were able to put together that timeline of the order in which they believed they were killed, and then identified them as these 4 missing women. So the women, as you can obviously tell, as we've described each one, they're of similar profiles. CBS News actually reports, I'm going to read this right from the report, as they kind of do say it quite well. So, quote, Dominic Verone, who was Suffolk County Chief of Detectives at the time, said that there were striking similarities among the Gilgo Four. Very petite, 5 foot or under, 100 pounds, Verone said. The women were also all in their 20s and were all working as online escorts. So as you can see, and we've covered serial killers before, and if you know anything about serial killers, they do often have very similar profiles of the victims. So the victims usually end up being very similar in like description of what they look like and stuff like that. So we know they were all escorts. They were all very similar in size and all of that. So, I mean, the police very quickly, assume that these disappearances and these murders are connected or done by the same person or persons because of the similar profiles. And also they're found within 500 feet of each other in the same location, which is, it's probably very unlikely that 4 different people who killed them are going to dump them in the exact same area, 500 feet from each other. So very likely it's the same person or persons. So, however, these 4 bodies that they do find first were only the tip of the iceberg, since the police would go on to eventually discover the remains of 6 additional victims, and in the same area that they found the first 4. So I'm going to get a little bit more into those other 6 victims in the next part of this case, in the next episode. So stay tuned for that. But it was very quickly believed again that all these found victims, so now they're up to 10 victims that were found, were killed by the same person. Like I said, because of the close location of the bodies and all of the other similar causes of death and similar profile. Some of them, so in that second batch of 6 bodies that were found, a couple of them are off the profile, and we'll get into that when I talk a little bit about them. But, 8 out of 10 are similar profiles, or at least, 7 out of 10, or the majority of them anyway. So I'll get into that, like I said, in the next part.
Like AJ said, they seem like they could all be the same killer, but there is some speculation on that detail. Some people think that there is more than one killer dumping in this area, and it's because of the way that the remains were disposed of. So the 6 that were found after the Gilgo 4, they just think that they don't match enough for them to be the same person who killed them all. So according to Disappeared, some of the remains had been dismembered. There was a bag of bones found in one of the cases, and some of the bodies were incomplete. And also the fact that there was a child and a male found, it really didn't fit with the other 4, who were all young escorts. And so one of these bodies had been there for about 15 years, they predicted, or at least 15 years. So police are thinking that maybe there was more than one serial killer dumping in that area. Like we said, we'll get into more of that a bit later. And after 19 months of searching, the police are still looking for Shannan, of course, in that same area. And they do come across Shannan's wallet with her ID and her shoes and her jeans scattered all around in the marshland, in that same area that they hadn't been able to really get into. And because the marshland was so thick, they had to bring in a special vehicle that could navigate through the swampy area for the investigation to continue. And on December 13th, 2011, which was exactly 1 year after they had found the first set of remains, Shannan Gilbert's body was finally found. And in the beginning, when Shannan's body was found, authorities concluded that she had died from exposure to the elements and it was not an act of murder. They claimed that she, like we had talked about, she had some sort of nervous breakdown or bad reaction to drugs. She was running for her life into the swampy bushes, and then she quickly exhausted herself and died, possibly of drowning, they say. And her family doesn't believe that, of course. A lot of people say that it's just too much of a coincidence that Shannan happened to be in the same area where a serial killer was dumping all of its bodies. They're saying that it has to be connected. I guess this is still like a mystery. People are thinking that it's a coincidence. Other people think that she was killed by the same serial killer. I'm curious to know what you guys think actually happened to Shannan. Do you think she did come across someone that killed her that night, or do you think it was just super unfortunate that she died of exposure or drowning in the swamp?
I don't know. When I was researching this case and I came across that, I don't know. like, I don't want to speculate either way because there's a lot of people saying, like what you said, like a lot of people saying that she was killed and a lot of people saying it was just a coincidence, but I don't know. Like, I don't, yeah, I have no comment because I really don't know, to be honest.
Yeah, I would say I just don't think it would be a coincidence. I don't know. I mean, weird things happen and coincidences can happen, but I'm just thinking like it's kind of very suspicious. At the very least, it's like very, very suspicious coincidence. So I would say it's probably connected. I don't know, but like maybe she was running in that area and caught this person dumping bodies or something, right? Like we don't know what she saw. Maybe she came across this person and she had to be killed because of that. I just feel like it's very odd that that she would be found in the same area. Not impossible, but odd. But and I was trying to think like maybe was there any other victims that were like killed around that exact same time, which maybe we don't know yet. Maybe it'll come out, but maybe he was like there that night dumping the bodies or doing something, checking up on the bodies or something. Who knows? And maybe she saw him. Something. That's what I was thinking. So I think it's connected. That's if I had to say one way or the other, but obviously I can't be certain.
That's interesting. I kind of almost tend to lean the other way. I feel like maybe it isn't connected and it's just a huge coincidence because when I was watching that series, The Killing Season, they go into the swamp where she was found. And I mean, they have these big rubber boots on. They have like long sleeve shirts, they have gloves, and they're walking through the swamp. And it's hard for them to even get through there, and it's really far in there. And they're saying, like, it would be crazy for someone to kill someone and then drag them through this swamp. Like, what would be the point, especially if the killer was dumping bodies in other easier locations? Why all of a sudden drag her through there and leave her? And they're saying it would have been super hard for someone to do that. It was really difficult for them to get in there. And so they think that it's possible that she really just was in a frenzied state and just ran through the swamp and eventually just died of the elements, because they did say that her pants were off. Like, they think maybe she had hypothermia, and that's one of the things that happens. You know, you get really warm even though you're super cold. You take your clothes off. I don't know. To me, it just kind of seems like she wasn't murdered because it doesn't really fit with the other ones. Like, she wasn't lined up like the other ones or even really in the same spot, even though it was very close. So to me, I don't know. It just doesn't completely connect.
See, I want to lean towards that it's not connected, but I just think it's too much of a coincidence. But then again, like, if she never went missing, like, none of these bodies would have been found, right? So it's like, I just find it's too much of a coincidence. That's why I don't know. I can't say for sure that she was murdered or that she just died of natural causes. Like, I really don't know.
And also, I mean, like, she went missing, I mean, I guess, I was going to say she went missing in May. Like, would she get hypothermia outside in May? I mean, it's kind of warm. It can be warm in May, even at night, maybe? I don't know.
No, well, they said because it was right by the ocean, like, the ocean breeze at night can actually make it super cold, even in May.
Oh, I guess that's... Okay. I guess that's fair. I was just, yeah. Maybe that was naive to think. But I was thinking, but it's like May, like in New York, it's not like winter.
Yeah.
I could see if it was like January, then it would be very easy.
Still night on the beach, though, by the beach. And, you know, that's chilly.
But would you get hypothermia that quickly? Like, I feel like by the time she came to, like, if she was on something, like, I feel like it would take longer in May to get hypothermia. Like, it's not going to be like in an hour. I don't know.
But she was wet. It was like wet and cold.
I
So, I mean, when you're wet, you can't heat yourself up. And they say she could have drowned as well. Like, she could have passed out with her face down in the swamp. So, I mean, they really don't know, obviously. That's what, like, the huge mystery that surrounds this. But yeah, I kind of tend to go towards it was an accident and just happened to be in the same area.
Which is shocking to me because you usually go towards, like, the murder side. Like we all do, but I don't know. It's kind of funny to me that you would go the other way. I don't know.
I know, we usually always agree, like, 100% on stuff. But this time, I'm not completely convinced, but I just feel like it seems more obvious that it was not connected, but because she was with two other people that night, and they never said they saw somebody else lurking around in the bushes. So,
but they also didn't go as far into the area as she did. Maybe, like, did they? Like, no, like they were just in a car, like searching. She's like going through the marshland.
Yeah, Yeah, but she was found in like the marshland, like farther back, and the other bodies were found like along the highway, right on Parkland Drive or something. So it wasn't even exactly the same area.
Yeah, they were found like in the sandy area.
Yeah. There were still lots of bushes in marshland. Like you obviously couldn't just see a body driving by, but she was deep in the swamp. So I don't know. It wasn't the exact same spot.
Yeah.
And not just an easy dumping ground. Like you would have had to trek through that swamp. It didn't seem likely they would, but.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like, yeah, I would be saying it's probably connected, but I'm also open-minded to the fact it could be just a coincidence. Like maybe it was fate. Like maybe it was just fate that her going missing is what led police to these other bodies. I mean, not to say that they never would have been found otherwise, but they wouldn't have been found at that point. And who knows how long it could have been. And it still was a long time until they developed. It's ended up going where they go anyway, even though they were found in 2010. Like it still was many years after that. But I don't know. I just think I would say they're connected, but I'm no expert, so who knows. I think we're going to end our part 1 here. I know we kind of touched on a lot of different parts of this. So that's where we're going to end it for now. And then we're going to pick it up kind of where the investigation leads to after this, and also some serial killer theories. I'm going to go into a little bit more, like I said, about these 6 bodies that were found next after those first 4. I'm going to talk about who they were and a little bit, kind of a connection to an old case that ends up coming up. So that's what you can look forward to next week in our part 2 of this case coverage. So thanks so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed part 1. You can follow us on all the social medias at Crime Family Podcast on Instagram and on Facebook, Crime Family Pod 1 on X. And if you'd like to get merch for the show, you can find the link for that in the show notes to get some of the merch. You can also join our Patreon if you would like to support the show and get some extra content. You can do that as well at the link in the show notes that we're going to put as well. And continue to do all the things, follow us on all the social medias. You can send us an email, crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com with your case suggestions or your feedback. Send us a review, give us a rating on your podcast app, all of that stuff. And we're on YouTube as well, so you can subscribe to us at Crime Family Podcast. And listen to all of our episodes there as well. So thanks so much. It was great. Great being here for part 1 of this case. And we'll see you next week for part 2. Until then, take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.